Alright, so I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning to a warm house. I came outside in my underpants, looked around with the flashlight, didn't see any obvious problems. The fan was turning, it sounded like the compressor was running. I got back inside, it started to cool off a little bit. And a couple hours later, I guess about an hour later, I woke up again and it was still hot. So came outside and I noticed the fan was running, but I didn't hear the compressor running. So I would like to show you how I troubleshoot these types of problems. So this is my own personal AC. So I got the contactor pulled out now. I'm sorry, the disconnect pulled out now. I got the electrical box open. So let's plug it in and see what happens. You pros will know what's wrong right away, but I'm going to show you how you find out for sure. So you can hear the compressor running. See the fan turning. All good so far, right? Let's give it a minute. Probably. Uh-oh. Notice what just happened, or what's happening. The fan is slowing down. You probably can't see it in the video. Fan is stopping. Compressor is still running. So we don't want to let that go for too long, otherwise we'll trip the high pressure cutoff. So I pulled the disconnect out. So that could be a couple of things. So we lost our 120 volts, 240 volts. Everything here should be safe. So the way this unit is configured, there is a single capacitor right here that is just used to start the compressor. So this is a compressor start capacitor. Okay. And the fan is one of those fancy ECM or X13 or one of those fancy electronic fans. So let's get our meter and we'll follow some troubleshooting steps. All right, so what you want to start here with, anytime you have a problem with your outside condensing fan, I already know what the problem is here, but I was going to walk you guys through how you troubleshoot these things. So this is your contactor. What this does is thermostat sends a 24 volt signal to this to energize a bridge that connects this side here to this side. So think of it as a relay, really is. So what you want to do first off, with the power on, you want to check to make sure you're getting 240 volts across these two terminals, or whatever voltage your unit calls for. If you're not getting that, then you got problems. You got to start working backwards, from, I guess work from the breaker forwards to figure out where the problem might be. Okay, so if you have line voltage here, with the thermostat calling for cooling, which it is right now. Notice this terminal is pressed in. You can hear this thing buzzing. If I yank the thermostat wire off, control wire off the side, notice it's out now. So you can push this in manually. But my house is bloody hot, so it's calling for cooling, which is why I got sucked in. So now with the contactor energized, what you want to do is you want to check for line voltage on the opposite side, because again, when the thermostat is calling for cooling, you should get line voltage on this side. When it's not, you should get nothing. So I don't get anything right now because again I pulled the disconnect, but that's just the theory. So once you've narrowed that down, if your unit does have a capacitor that runs the fan and the compressor, that's one of those dual run, you want to make sure that you test the capacitor. They're cheap. If you want to just replace it, that's fine, but you want to put your meter on capacitor. Then you want to check both terminals. Well, here there's just two, but on a dual there will be three. So what I usually do is I'll disconnect the wires, I'll pull the capacitor out just so I can access it easier, and I'll just check across those two terminals. But this one, I know this one's fine. I'll show you, prove it to you. So I'll put the probes across those two terminals. It's a 40 microfarad capacitor. We get 40.6, so we're fine on this one. So this capacitor's good. Kind of just to illustrate how it works, let me get one of those dual run capacitors. All right, so this is what a dual run capacitor looks like. They're going to be different for every unit, or they probably will be different for every unit. Notice you see the 40 plus 10 microfarad plus minus 5%. So a lot of units will have this type of capacitor. And when you're testing these, good idea to discharge them, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but you want to discharge them by just shorting out the terminals with a screwdriver or other conductive device. So what you want to do is, notice on this one there's a little C, that's the common. So you stick your probes across common and the other two terminals. So this is 40. This one should be 10 because it's a 40 plus 10. Yep, so this capacitor is good. So now again, the one in my unit right now does not have 3 terminals, it only has 2 because that fan motor is one of those fancy ones that does not need a capacitor. So let's think logically about this. What have we determined? We checked to make sure we were getting line voltage. I know we were because we saw things running. We checked to make sure we're getting line voltage on the other side of the contactor when it was calling for cooling. Again, we know that it was because we saw things running. So what's going on now? So we saw the compressor continue to run, right? And we saw the fan shut off. We know the capacitor is not part of the fan circuit. So that tells us we probably have a problem with the fan motor. Now, these units, I will tell you, have been eating fan motors. This will be the third fan motor for these units in 4 years. So this one was replaced maybe a year and a half ago, and that one not quite as long ago. So apparently there's some kind of design flaw with these. I don't know what it is. So what I did is, when this happened a second time, I looked at that part number on the fan. It's a Gentech fan, one of those fancy ones. And I did this. I bought a plain old dumb, as in no ECM, no electronics, nothing, fixed speed TSC motor. So this is the old school fan motor. They've been using these for 1,000 years. They don't use them anymore very much because of efficiency reasons. So this fan does draw a bit more power than the ECM one. It's not variable speed. It doesn't have that soft start feature, but I don't really care about how much power it's going to use. I want the thing to run, and I want it to run reliably. I'm tired of replacing fan motors. So if anybody from Rheem is watching this, get your act together. I don't know where you're getting your fans from, or maybe Gentech just had a bad batch, but if they had a bad batch, I got 3. So anyway, I found this ProTech fan motor with ball bearings. It was a bit difficult to find. It was, I think, about 120 bucks, and I decided when I replaced that last one, I paid the AC company to come out and replace it because it was under warranty. I said, you know what? I'm going to keep this in stock for when this happens again. And lo and behold, it's happened again. So now, I mentioned it's under warranty. You might be asking yourself, why don't I just call the AC company? Well, you know, they charge a fee to come out and diagnose the problem. Then they have to order the parts, submit the warranty claim. That takes days. It's July. It's South Florida. It's hot. Could they put a rescue motor in there? Yeah, they could, but all this costs money. I mean, one service call costs more than this entire motor. So unless there's a serious problem, I'm not using that warranty. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sure some of you would be saying if you were a licensed HVAC contractor, you can do it yourself, but yeah, this is not my day job. I apologize. I'm just a DIYer. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to take the old fan motor out. We're going to put this one in. One thing I like to do just for good measure is, I mean, this is not rocket science, but if you're not comfortable doing this stuff, is just take a picture where all the wires came from, just so there's no dispute later on when you're putting things back together. The reason why I had that capacitor on the workbench that I showed you for testing purposes is that new fan motor does require a capacitor. So this capacitor has to be swapped out. So when I bought that motor, I bought a capacitor for it at the same time, so I wouldn't be caught high and dry when this problem occurred again. So this capacitor is coming out, this fan motor is coming out. Let's get started. The first step is obviously to kill power to the unit. You don't just want to shut it off of the thermostat, you want to pull the disconnect, because what could happen is, what happens if all of a sudden someone in the house turns it on, or the fan starts working magically, or whatever. Something could go wrong, and someone could get seriously injured if this fan starts turning while you're handling this. So always pull the disconnect. And on this unit, there's 4 screws that hold this top shroud on, and the whole thing lifts out in assembly. So I'm just undoing these screws one at a time. All right, so I got those 4 screws out. You want to gently pry up on this rain tight hub here. This keeps water out of the fan. Okay. And then those 4 screws have to come out. But first, we're going to lift the fan shroud out of the unit. All right, so we got the thing flipped up. And what I like to do while I'm in here is I just clean things out. Notice you see there's a lot of debris in the bottom there. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything, but notice there's drain holes down there. So I like to get all the leaves and crap out of there while I got everything apart. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to take a garden hose and clean these coils out. You can see they're pretty clean, but again, we're in here. I don't take this apart that often, so let's just hit it again with some cool water from a garden hose. All right, so we got our wires disconnected. Nothing is attaching this to the unit anymore. So what I'm going to do, take this inside and we're going to work on it on the bench. So again, here's my replacement motor, and I got a matching capacitor here. And I chose, I don't know if I mentioned this before, I chose a 4010 because the motor says right on there that it requires 10 microfarads. I don't know if you guys can read that, but it's right there on the motor. And I already know the compressor requires 40. So the compressor will get hooked up to the Herm side here, and the fan motor will get hooked up to the fan side right here. So one capacitor, 2 purposes. So now we got to get this thing apart. So I'm just going to take off those screws or bolts or whatever they are on the back of that motor that hold it to to that grate right there. When I change my mind, I'm going to take the fan blade off first. Sometimes that can be a little tricky, especially if the unit is older. You got to take this screw, loosen that set screw off, and hopefully the fan will just slide right off. If it doesn't, they make pullers. I do have a puller on standby just in case we need it. So let's try and get this thing apart. Alright, even though this motor's pretty new, it was replaced not that long ago, it's not coming off without a fight, so I put this puller on. So the way this puller works, it's got 3 set screws here, 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 tightens down on the hub, and you just basically just tighten this with a wrench. So let's do it. Okay, easy as pie, no big deal. So now we have our motor right here. Now we can flip it over and take it off of this shroud. Before I mentioned cleaning the coils, that's pretty easy. I mean, a lot of guys will use cleaners. I'm not a big fan of cleaners because these coils are copper and aluminum. They're pretty reactive. I just use plain water. If you use plain water and do it often enough, you'll never need to use a cleaner. So you can just make sure you're not bending the fins in the coil. Spray them out real good with the hose. And you get close to like that. Make sure you cover the whole coil. Get all the debris out of there. Make sure the drain holes are clear. You guys get the idea. Alright, so I got the fan shroud just resting on the back of the fan motor. You want to make sure that the wiring comes out the same spot that it came out before, because sometimes you won't be able to remount this correctly. So you see all my screw holes line up. They are not threaded, so I guess they gave us self-tapping screws. So wiring's coming out the right side, got our 4 screw holes lined up. Let's bolt it on. Alright, so we got the fan motor bolted to the shroud. Now it's time to put the fan back on. Just going to blow off some of the water here. I washed this off. The whole point is to keep water out, not in, right? And the minor thing I'd like to point out, a lot of times when I see these swap fan motors, a lot of guys will just join the wires right here and leave them exposed. I see no reason to do that. Use the conduit that came with the thing. Put the wires in there, protect them, keep them all together, make the job look neat. Why do it any other way? Save a couple bucks? Not worth it. Alright, so let's flip this thing over. Put it on the bench. I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on that motor shaft just so we don't have, maybe next time if this ever happens again in the life of this unit, we won't have to use the puller. Not that I don't like the puller, but to make things easy to come apart if they have to come apart, right? A little dab doesn't take a lot. And you want to put your fan back on so that the set screw lines up with the groove in the motor shaft. We may have to fine tune the height of the motor. Let's see if, sorry, the height of the fan. Let's see if these motors are the same height. Okay, so the old motor was a little bit taller. Actually quite a bit, but that's not going to be a problem. Let's put this fan all the way at the end. And we'll go check the height. So that motor right there, the old one's a little bit taller than this one, which means the fan will sit higher up. Snug that down just a little bit, and then we'll go check the fit. Just eyeballing the fit, it doesn't look that far off from this one, which has the factory motor. Well, I guess the second factory motor. So I think we'll go with this. Okie dokie. I fed all of the wires through the side here and back out through that plate where they came in before. I I just got them dangling out here. So now we gotta swap out our capacitor. All right, so this is a 3-wire setup. So on 3-wire, your orange, or listen, at least on this 3-wire, your orange and your black are your line. This is a 240 volt motor. So we're gonna hook these to either side of the contactor, on the power side, obviously. So put the black on one side, put the orange on the other. Oddly, there was no ground terminal on this new one, so all right, I'm going to leave the capacitor unhooked for the moment until we confirm everything's working okay. So let's put the disconnect back in and give her a try. All right, I had to move some wires around. I was careless and wasn't paying attention. So what I did is I moved the orange wire here, and I moved the black wire from the fan to the other terminal on the contactor. And as you can see, everything's running now. Put the rain tight cap back on, keep the water out. Ow, I really just hurt my wrist. Just, oh man, twisted it. Ugh. Had some kind of injury to my left wrist a couple weeks ago, and I just hit it the wrong way. All right, so everything's pretty easy from this point on. Just don't leave your capacitor like that. Put it back in its holder. Do it right. In fact, let me do it right. All right, so I put the dual run capacitor back in its holder. It's secure. I zip tied the wires up. Again, there was no connection for this ground, unfortunately, in the new motor, so we'll just kind of leave it like that. I'll cap it off with this wire. Touch something and cause a mini disaster. But that's it. So all you got to do is bolt this panel back on. You didn't see me take it off, so I'm not going to show you how to put it back on. If you like it, subscribe. Hope it helps you.